In today's video, we'll be bringing you 10 unique and effective crosshairs that both look and feel fresh. What's going on, ProGuides fam? It's your host, Sergeant Frost. It's been a hot minute since our last crosshair video, so we felt like it would be a good idea to share some of the most unique and cool crosshairs as we wait for the delayed patch 5.02. After this video, people will be asking for your crosshair settings all the time, so let's not beat around the bush. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let's jump right into it. Alright, so this first crosshair is a great simple crosshair. I've had this one for a long time, and when I can't decide on what crosshair I want to play, I usually end up with this one. It's a small green diamond with a gap in it, and it has a great balance of being easily noticeable while also being low profile and easy to aim with. A great all-around crosshair if you ask me. Now of course, you're free to choose whatever crosshair color you like, but the other settings are of course set in stone. For outlines and dot settings, just set them off, while you put inner lines at 1 opacity, 3 length, 1 thickness, and no offset, or 1310, and outer lines at 1 opacity, 2 length, 3 thickness, and no offset once more, so 1230. Or you can copy the code in the description down below. Now of course, as with all crosshairs on this list, you want to be making sure you got your firing and movement errors set to off across the board. Turning these on can be done on a couple of these crosshairs, but honestly most of the time it's more distracting than anything else, meaning we don't really recommend it. So if you're not sure if you got all the settings right and you want to make sure you get the correct crosshair, just copy it from the crosshair codes in the description below. That way you can be 100% sure you get the right one, and you won't even have to copy all these values manually yourself. Before we move on, why don't we quickly go over our question of the day. But today won't really be a question, but rather a request. Drop your favorite crosshair codes in the comments so we can all get some fresh new crosshairs to run in games. With that being said, I'm looking forward to seeing your replies. The second crosshair is a pretty interesting one that could be usable in game, but might not be the most practical as a main crosshair. It's basically a small black die that landed on 4, so it's fully black and has 4 little dots in whatever color you decide to go for. Personally, I think cyan looks really good, but feel free to experiment and change the die to whatever your liking may be. This crosshair is definitely very unique, so if you want to surprise your teammates with a crosshair they've never seen before, this one will definitely do the trick. For settings, set the outlines on with 1 opacity as well as 1 thickness, and also turn the dot on with 1 opacity and 6 thickness. For inner lines, 1 opacity, 2 length, 2 thickness, and no offset, so 1220. And for outer lines, 0 opacity, 1 length, 4 thickness, and no offset, or 0140. I mean, the crosshair is literally a dice roll, right? So why not try your chances and see if the crosshair is something for you? And while you're at it, it's about that time in the video where we ask you to take your chances and come visit us at ProGuides.com, where we have Radiant and Immortal level coaches who are always ready to help you improve. Coaching is always a great way to improve your fundamentals. So if you want to rock any crosshair and play well, then click the link in the description and level up your gameplay today. Now this next one is another hybrid between creative and generally just a really solid crosshair. With the shape it has, you're definitely the only one on the team using it, but you're not sacrificing vision or otherwise getting a disadvantage in any way. This crosshair is actually really solid. You can definitely rifle well with it. It's clean, clearly visible, and if I had to guess, the only reason not more people are using it is because it's a bit difficult to recreate. So that's what we'll tell you right now. Outlines are on of course, and as you probably already saw from the crosshair itself, you just want to set it to 1 opacity as well as thickness. The center dot is off, and inner lines will be set at 0 opacity, 3 length, and thickness, and 4 offset, 0334. With outer lines should be set at 0.4 opacity, 3 length, 1 thickness, and 3 offset, so 0.4313. Now I should mention, if the color doesn't really look good, you can always play around with the outer lines opacity. If you increase it, the color becomes brighter, but I personally kind of like the dark look that 0.4 gives. Either way, feel free to import the code and play around with the color, until you find the right version for you. Next up, a crosshair that kind of reminded me of the old Xbox 360 logo, at least if you use it in green, although using it in a different color is fine as well, I guess. And yeah, I don't know, I guess this crosshair really just made me relive some memories, and I love that. So if you want to relive some memories on your own, or if you just want to cop the Xbox crosshair, it's outlines on, opacity at 1, thickness 1, center dot on, with again opacity of 1 and thickness 6. Then for the inner lines, it's 1220, so 1 opacity, 2 length, 2 thickness, and 0 offset. And for outer lines, 0 opacity, 1 length, 2 thickness, and 3 offset, so 0123. And of course, all the movement and firing errors are set to off. If it doesn't work, you can always copy the code from the description. Next up, we got a perfect crosshair for when you want to X out some heads, and that's this red X crosshair. A great fit for anyone trying to put a stop to the funny business but still run a serious looking crosshair. It's a great crosshair that isn't too large so that you won't have trouble seeing, and it also functions kind of like the plus crosshair that some pros like to use. To create this, put outlines on off, while you set the center dot to 1 opacity as well as 3 thickness. Inner lines are set to 1 opacity, 1 length, 6 thickness, and 1 offset, aka 1161. And outer lines are turned completely off. Just copy the code in the description below and it should work just fine. Feel free to try it out next time if you're on a Sentinel, or any other role, we won't tell. Now we've got the Snowflake. This one is for people who like bigger crosshairs with some added flair. It's big, making it a lot easier to see, and since it's white, it contrasts very well with the backgrounds in the game. And because there's a small dot inside, you also don't have to worry much about having a crosshair that's too big to see things well. Another thing that makes this crosshair really unique is that it works very well with the firing error too. If you copy the code from the description below and set the firing error on in both inner lines and outer lines, you can see what kind of effects you get. It's pretty cool. Again, I'm not a huge fan of a moving crosshair personally, but if it's your style, then go for it. It works really well with this specific crosshair. Anyways, in case you're watching it on your phone or something and can't copy the code, here's how to make it regardless. Outlines are off and the center dot is on, then use 1 opacity and 3 thickness. 1 opacity for inner lines as well as a length of 5 and a thickness of 3. Use that with a 4 offset, so that way you get 1, 5, 3, 4. And for the outer lines, you want to go with 1 opacity again, now with 1 length, 5 thickness, and 6 offset, creating 1, 1, 5, 6. Next up, we have gears. Another really cool crosshair idea that's not only unique, but also very practical. I'm sure everyone can see these white gears make for a perfectly good crosshair. It's large enough to be clearly visible, and it also has gaps in it so that you can see through it perfectly. To create it, set both outlines and center dot to off and put your inner lines at 1 opacity, 4 length, 2 thickness, and 2 offset. So 1, 4, 2, 2. And use 1, 1, 10, 3 for outer lines, meaning 1 opacity, 1 length, 10 thickness, and 3 offset. Or just the code from the description. Now, for the one that I personally consider the prettiest crosshair on this list is this nice little white gem. It has a very unique shape that you don't really see often at all, and the white and black contrast very nicely together. I don't know, I just love it. So if you want to use it as well, here's what you do. Outlines on at 1 opacity and 1 thickness, and center dot also on, just at 0 opacity and 5 thickness. For inner lines, you want to use 0 opacity, 3 length, 3 thickness, and no offset, producing 0, 3, 3, 0. And for outer lines, you go for 1 opacity, 4 length, 1 thickness, and again, no offset, so you get 1, 4, 1, 0. Looks cool, right? Well, in case you're not convinced yet, or maybe you just like a slightly different style, you can also disable the center dot and you get the same idea, just in a different shape. I definitely prefer it with the center dot on, but I have to say, the second version is clean as well, so I might end up using that from time to time. If you want to join me, make sure to copy from the description below. Every creative crosshair tier list needs at least 1 flower, so this is ours. I think it looks really nice in yellow, so here's how you make it. Outlines on with 0.5 opacity and thickness set at 1, while you have the center dot on as well with 0.5 opacity again and a thickness value of 4. For inner lines, you want to use 1 opacity, 3 length, 2 thickness, and 2 offset. So 1, 3, 2, 2. And for outer lines, you go with 0 opacity, 1 length, 8 thickness, and lastly 3 offset. So 0, 1, 8, 3. This all makes for a really nice yellow flower that's a bit see-through, making it a little bit different for each type of surface you look at. So make sure to copy the code and try it out. And lastly, we have the sun crosshair. Basically a large yellow dot with sunlight coming out of all sides. If you want to light up the scoreboard, this one's for you. To make it, disable your outlines and put the center dot at 1 opacity with 6 thickness. Then for inner lines with 1 opacity again with 1 length, 10 thickness, and 1 offset. So 1, 1, 10, 1. And for outer lines, simply go for 1 opacity, 4 length, 4 thickness, and no offset, or 1, 4, 4, 0. And as always, you can always copy it from the description below. This one is just the right size to fit over a head mid-range perfectly, so it makes getting those crucial headshots very manageable. Give it a try and let us know what you think. Well guys, that's gonna have to wrap it up. Thanks so much for watching the video. This has been your host Sergeant Frost, and make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.